Hello and welcome to the MovieKing Podcast. My name is David Jurmann and I'll be your host. On today's episode, I'll be reviewing The Monkey and The Unbreakable Boy. So, two very, very different types of movies. Couldn't really get more opposite than that. Starting off with The Monkey, last summer, Osgood Perkins released his latest movie, Longlegs. He and the studio releasing it, Neon, did a phenomenal job marketing that film and making it look like something new and exciting for horror. It was one of my most anticipated movies from last year, but also one of the most disappointing. I really thought it was going to be great. It had Nick Cage in it as sort of like this serial killer. It looked really interesting and like had the FBI investigating the whole thing and in the movie. I just thought it was really an interesting idea and I was so excited for it, but it was really disappointing. But his newest movie, The Monkey, looked like a lot of fun and is kind of embracing that campy horror that I've been raving about lately. The trailers looked good, pretty cool trailers and good reviews. Those things got me excited to see what this movie would be like. And I'll say this, parts of this movie are exactly what I hoped it would be. Parts of it are really entertaining and engaging and a lot of fun. Basically, the premise of this movie is that a toy monkey kills someone when you play with it, and it's a lot of just insane, over-the-top deaths that play out like something like at a cartoon. I saw a video someone posted online that was kind of comparing the deaths in this movie to like an episode of SpongeBob where Squidward falls off his bike and it explodes. And that got me really excited because I was like, oh, if the deaths in this movie are like that, then I'm going to have a lot of fun with it. And I'll say this right now, I don't think any of the deaths in this movie were that funny or insane, but they are very, like, let's just call them, like, very over the top for this kind of movie. The deaths are gross, but played for laughs. Some may find it funnier than others, which I'll get to, but some of it I did find pretty funny and had a smile on my face for sure with. I mean, which is, it's a little weird to say about, like, someone dying, but even the tagline of this movie is, like, everyone dies and that's, effed up. And, like, that's kind of the whole thing this movie's going with. It's like, everyone's gonna die and it's just, like, it's crazy. But, that's just kind of what this movie is. And this movie is based on a short story from Stephen King, so you can kind of imagine what it's going to be like from that. He's a very particular type of style and, just a particular view with the way he tells stories. And you just know a Stephen King story when you're watching. I mean, you really do. And this definitely feels like a Stephen King type of movie. And to me, the first act of this movie is probably the best part of it. Like, it's the funniest, it has the most engaging part of the story, and kind of feels like it's telling a short story, which is what it's based off of. It just really has a nice flow to it. I was enjoying myself watching it. I was just like, oh, this is a very nice, kind of vibe. Like, I was really into it. I also have to say the toy monkey is pretty creepy. It's similar to the one from Toy Story 3, but with drums instead of cymbals. I don't know. I mean, if you've seen Toy Story 3, you know that monkey. Like, it's a pretty scary monkey for a rated G movie. Like, I still think about it sometimes. I'm like, how did they get away with that? Like, I was terrified of that thing as a kid. Like, that thing is not kid-friendly at all. Like, its eyes are, like, bulging out of its head. Like, that's a scary monkey. And this one, they couldn't actually do the same monkey. They wanted to do the exact same thing with, like, the cymbals. But apparently Disney copyrighted that or trademarked it, so they couldn't use it. So now it has drums. But I do actually kind of like the drums. Every time like something happens, like it just starts doing like, this drum beat. The movie also does this thing where it plays this song every time the monkey bangs the drums. It's a nice motif to let you know things are about to go down. I thought that was pretty cool and just kind of let you know like, ooh, things are getting riled up now. And even though the deaths are played for laughs in this movie, there's still this eeriness to it that kind of shows off the horror side of things. Like, it's not just a comedy. It does still feel horror in some ways. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, these deaths, they are cartoony, but they are also graphic. It's still very bloody and kind of messed up. You have a few in particular that's just like, ooh, that hurt, like a bit of, ooh, like, something out of, like, Final Destination. But once this movie has a time jump, the movie begins to tell a different story, and one that had potential but didn't entirely engage me. The movie is rather repetitive too. Like, the whole story of the movie revolves around people dying in horrible ways, right? And there's just not much else to the film, character or story-wise, to elevate it beyond that. Like, there's something going on, obviously. I mean, there's a whole thing with, like, two brothers and one of the brothers and his son, and just sort of trying to bond a little bit. But it just, I don't know, it just didn't, it felt a little hollow, I think, to me, is really what was bothering me. Like, the whole thing just kind of, it never felt very fleshed out. It just kind of felt like it was there, and I wasn't really moved by it or really interested to see where it would go. I was just kind of like, okay, let's see where this is going, I guess. I was just really there to see the monkey kill some people. That's all I wanted to see, and when we got that, that was when the movie was kind of entertaining. That's what I wanted out of it. But the movie does find ways to one-up the deaths themselves, so they stay pretty shocking and disturbing, and I guess let's call it fresh, like they really do, like, kind of one-up itself. You're like, oh, how are they going to go any crazier with this next death, and they somehow do it. It's like, oh, wow, that's brutal. So that was pretty cool. I mean, I enjoyed that. The movie, when it was like that, was good. I think maybe this would have been better as a short film, like, maybe, as a feature, it feels a little bit like maybe too long, but I don't know. That's just kind of how I felt. As for the acting here, it's mostly fine. I like Theo James, and he has a lot to do here, but his performance and really all of them are pretty dry humor. Like, they're dry performances too. There's just not a ton of expression. It's just very serious delivery for the jokes. And that can be very hit or miss for people. I mean, that kind of comedy is very hit or miss for me. Yorgos Lanthimos is known for dark and dry comedy. This isn't a Yorgos Lanthimos movie, but this kind of has that type of humor, and that type of humor in particular isn't my favorite. I was hoping to laugh and grin from ear to ear more throughout the movie. I mean, I heard a lot of people saying they had a really fun time watching it. I got that in little spurts, but I didn't really feel that throughout as a whole. So look, this is a movie you'll probably either love or be not so crazy about. I was really hoping to like this more than Long Legs, which I was really disappointed by, but also a lot of people did like Long Legs. I just think I'm not a huge Osgood Perkins fan at this point in time, which is also similar to Yorgos Lanthimos. But look, if you did like Long Legs, check this out. You'll probably have a good time with it. If you didn't care for Long Legs, you might be like me and just be like, that wasn't great. So I don't know, I'm going to give it a C+. It's by no means a bad movie. It's perfectly watchable. It's fine. But I just wasn't huge on it, so it's okay. Alright, and next up is The Unbreakable Boy. I'm not going to sugarcoat this one. I didn't have much faith going into it that it would be good. This movie was originally scheduled to release not one, not two, but 3 whole years ago. That's a long time. This movie was supposed to come out like 2022, and the producers listed that reason for delaying this movie so long as political division, which to me makes no sense for this. I mean, the movie isn't political at all, having seen it. I mean, there's nothing here that I'm like, yeah, that really seems like a movie that would divide people politically. Like, no, this is not a movie like that at all. And even lead actor Zachary Levi's controversy that he's been having lately only started 1 or 2 years ago, so that's not really related to why this movie was delayed in the first place. But even so, I tried to go in with an open mind, having known all this, and judge the movie on its own merits. And not to mention, I didn't really like the trailer much either, so I was just kind of like, I don't know how this is gonna be. And with that being said, I did not like this movie. Not at all, really. This film is about a family with a boy named Austin who is autistic and has brittle bone disease, meaning that even the slightest injury can result in a broken bone. And look, this is based on a true story, so in theory, there's actually a compelling plot here, about a family trying to let their son be himself and live his best life despite the obstacles he's facing, and that's a really interesting idea. Like, I think that, seeing that as a family perspective and just, how he's limited and kind of how the family wants him to really be this unbreakable boy instead of just, constantly breaking his bones and not really being seen as who he wants to be seen as. That's a really interesting idea, but unfortunately, that's just not what this movie is. This movie just doesn't really do that. Instead, it spends a ridiculous amount of time not on Austin or even his brother, but the parents. And look, I'm one who, I think there's a lot of sympathy to be had for parents who, deal with kids, with disabilities and just different conditions. I think that's a really important thing to look at, and there's certainly a good angle for that, absolutely. but this movie spends so much time on the parents, and parents who are irresponsible, dishonest, and lack accountability for a large portion of the movie. I mean, I get it. Look, there are parents who make mistakes. I understand that completely, but this movie's parents, like, they are bad. Like, they are, like, worst parents of the year material right here. I mean, particularly the dad, Scott. He makes a lot of mistakes that make it so hard to even root for him. Like, instead, I just sat there flabbergasted by how reckless he was as a father. And I understand this is a true story, but it literally reaches a point where I just can't sympathize with him anymore. Like, I'm just like, this guy can't be around the kids. Like, this is bad. And I understand it's part of the point, but it's just not conveyed well, and I think it really doesn't do a good job at making you feel any sympathy towards Scott. Instead, you just kind of want him out of the picture. And it's made even worse by the fact that in reality, The Unbreakable Boy is really Scott's movie. It's largely from his perspective, and I think that a much better film would have shown how bad parenting is seen from the children it affects. Like, I think Marriage Story, completely different subject matter, but that movie also just does a great job of showing the parents' perspective, but also how it's affecting the child, and just the whole thing. Like, it's a really strong story for that film. I think this movie was probably trying to do a little more of, like, something like Wonder, what that did, but Wonder was really smart and focused on the child, and I think that movie did a much better job of telling this kind of story. And I think all the actors do a fine job. It's really none of their faults, but I thought most of the characters were pretty bad and frankly kind of annoying. There's this section of the movie that Austin even narrates, which feels like a weird choice considering only a few parts of the movie are from his point of view. Like, I just don't really understand the point of that. If it was from his point of view, I totally get it. But, it's like he's narrating parts of his father's life, and it's like, why is he telling this story? Shouldn't Zachary Levi, be narrating this movie since it's really kind of Scott's tale? I don't know, it's weird. And I just also didn't find this movie funny at all. Like, I literally didn't grin once, which maybe make me look heartless, I don't know, but that's just really what it was. I genuinely couldn't smile during this movie. Like, I tried to get into it, but it was just nothing funny, nothing to make me happy. And I thought the tonal shifts here were really jarring. In one scene, you'll have something very silly and childlike happening, like, there's one imagination scene where they're, like, flying, and then in the next, it's, like, a lot of heavy drinking and depression. It's just a really weird mix that can't really decide if it's trying to be more for families or more for adults. I don't know, it just didn't work for me. I thought it was a really jarring experience. And this is largely due to bad writing and direction from John Gunn, who has no relation that I'm aware to of director James Gunn, who is awesome, a really great director. I don't know, I've never seen anything else from John Gunn. I don't have anything against the guy. I just didn't like the way this movie was made. I thought it was very bland looking. It didn't really tell the story in a way that made me moved at all. I didn't really take anything away from it. I just didn't enjoy it. And I was bored throughout the whole thing and honestly wanted it to end. It's not the worst thing ever. Like, I don't want to sound like this is like a total train wreck. It's not. It's just, I think it just does a disservice to this kind of story by making it all about the parents' point of view and making it hard to connect with the parents themselves. Like, if you're going to tell the story from the parents, perspective of things, I think at the very least you should make the parents very sympathetic and make me really, understand where they're coming from, even if they're making these mistakes. Like, that, I get it, mistakes happen. Take the movie The Fabelmans, or again, Marriage Story is a perfect example of, like, parents who are, not happy and they're making all these bad choices sometimes, but you understand where they're coming from, and you also understand that at the end of the day, they're still just trying to help their kid, and I think that's what this movie needed to do a better job of. Even if it's a true story, just let me understand where these people are coming from. And if you can't do that, then maybe have it take place from the kid's perspective so I can at least feel his, sadness through it all and feel how he, maybe see how he's feeling about it all. So, I don't know. I don't want to go too much more on it. I think if this is your kind of movie, and believe me, you'll know if it is, you probably will enjoy it. I mean, I don't want to say, don't see it if you like these kind of movies. you'll probably have a decent enough time with it. But if you saw the trailer and thought this looked pretty lackluster, you'll probably agree with me that it is. It really just depends on, I think, what you kind of expect from this movie. So I think that's really all there is to say on it. I'm gonna rate it a D+. It's pretty bad. I really didn't care for it. But that's just me. And that about does it for this episode. If you want to follow my reviews, you can find me on Letterboxd at MovieKing1224. You can also listen to this podcast on your favorite apps such as Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. If you have any comments or feedback, I would love to hear and improve the show. And of course, if you've enjoyed this episode, please consider liking, subscribing, and hitting the notification bell to hear more like it. I appreciate you all so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.